Hey friend, Chris here from Wide Logic Pro Rules, the website and channel that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro. Welcome to the third and final video in a series of videos this week, all about getting started with the Universal Audio Apollo X Generation 2 interfaces in Logic Pro. This series is in collaboration with Universal Audio, but is also inspired by the emails, the questions, and requests I've received through the years for content. All right, in the previous video, video number 2, we dug in deeper with the Unison preamps of the Apollo X. After that, I showed you how to take advantage of the brand new auto gain feature to easily establish recording levels. And third, I applied some DSP effects to record acoustic guitar and vocals, and I printed the effects right into Logic Pro. In this video, we're going to tackle multi-track recording drums. So this has its own considerations, namely number 1, I have a drummer in the other room. So I need to provide him with his own headphone or cue mix, which can be easily achieved using the UAD console. Second, I'm going to take advantage once again of the awesome new auto gain feature to set recording levels for all channels in one shot, and also apply processing with the Unison preamp and channel strip. And third, I'll show you how to take advantage of the Talkback mic built right into the Apollo X interface so I can communicate with my performer in the other room. So let's dig into it. All right, so drums and microphones are all set up and my drummer is ready to go. So of course we need to establish recording levels, preamp levels for each channel for my drum kit. So I'm going to load an instance of the API Vision channel strip on each channel of analog 1 through 8. To do this, I'm going to click on the Unison field for analog 1. From here, I can narrow my search in the browser that pops up by clicking on the channel strip and preamps category. I'm going to select the API Vision channel strip. I like to load the Vision channel strip to each and every track. So I'm going to hold Option, click, hold, and drag to copy the channel strip to all my drum tracks. All right, so we're ready to go. But the current gain level of 40.5 dB, I have no clue if that's where I want to set my preamp levels. Instead, I'm going to click on the auto gain field for each and every channel that I plan on recording through. The auto gain menu pops up. And because I have multiple channels selected for auto gain, in this case, auto gain will only apply the gain change after the duration of time. I'll leave the levels for listening threshold and peak target as is. I'll ask my drummer to start playing, and I'll press start to begin the auto gain process. Great, so now auto gain has set the perfect preamp level for all of my tracks. So I know my tracks are not going to clip, and I also know that they're at a healthy level. So no worries on that front. Now the drums at this moment sound fine. They sound okay. The room is small. So I chose the API Vision channel strip specifically because it has an EQ section, it has compression, as well as a gate, which is really helpful. So I'm going to quickly tweak these different parameters for each of my channels so we have something that sounds a little more palatable, and we'll compare the before and after results. All right, so I've gone through and customized the EQ and the compression and gates for the individual drum tracks. And again, because this is the Unison preamp slot, all of these changes I've made, EQ, compression, gating, will get printed into Logic Pro. Now, normally I wouldn't include gating as a permanent effect that's recorded into Logic because not all bleed is bad, and also bleed can sometimes be helpful to fine-tune phase and polarity relationships across the kit. But for this video, I'll include the gates just so the differences are more obvious. So let's now do a before and after example. First, the drums recorded without any EQ, compression, or gating. And now what the drums sound like with processing. Big difference, right? Now my drummer has something much more inspiring to listen to as he's playing. So I'm pretty happy with those changes. Let's move on to setting up a headphone mix or cue mix for my drummer. Whether you're recording yourself or another artist, getting a great headphone mix is crucial to achieving a great recording and performance. And this can be supplied either using the built-in headphone outs or line outs of the Apollo X interfaces. By default, the main monitor mix, which is the panning and fader adjustments that you make at the bottom of the UAD console, is what is supplied to each headphone output of the Apollo X interfaces. These cue assignments can be viewed and adjusted by clicking on the cue output button on the right-hand side of the UAD console. In the cue outputs pop-up, you can see both headphone outputs 1 and 2 for the Apollo XAP interface. Headphone output 1 is set to the Q1 output, and headphone 2 is set to Q2, and they're both receiving the main monitor mix. So any fader adjustments, any panning adjustments I make in the UAD console will be heard through both headphone outputs. I can reassign either headphone to either cue just by clicking on this empty area of another cue. So I just moved headphone 1 to Q2, and I can move headphone 2 over to Q1. As I stated, both headphones are receiving the main monitor mix, which is noted by the highlighted mix button for each cue. If I click on this mix button for Q1, now headphone 1 is receiving its mix from a dedicated cue called Q1. But what is a cue output? What's a cue mix? What are we even talking about here? Well, let's say you're recording another artist, and perhaps they want to hear a different balance in their headphones than the balance that you've established in the UAD console. So you made fader adjustments, panning adjustments, it sounds good to you in your headphones or on your speakers, but your performer wants to hear something slightly different, maybe a little less of themselves and more of the other tracks in the mix, or vice versa, less of the other tracks and more of themselves. So you can provide your performer a dedicated cue mix of the balance they want to hear in their headphones, and that's what we're talking about. In my example, maybe my drummer wants to hear a little more kick, a little more snare, and less hi-hat in his headphones. I can provide that for him using the cue mix. So again, headphone 1 is set to Q1 in the UAD console. It's not listening to the main monitor mix because the mix button here is not highlighted. So my drummer is not going to hear anything in his headphones until I establish his cue mix. This can be achieved by clicking either the individual send fields here. I have the aux1 and aux2 channels that I can send to a separate effect like reverb, but now you can see Q1 is highlighted. So I can bring up the level for my drummer. I can then click on the arrow in the upper right-hand corner of the send popover to move to the next channel, to once again set the cue level and panning. And I can keep going through the channels here just by clicking on these arrows. However, there is a faster way to establish a cue mix in the UAD console. Let me go over to the Sends Overview button and click. Now, instead of seeing a little preview for all the sends for each channel, I can view a small or large view for each cue, and now I can quickly establish those levels and panning for my drummer. Another way to quickly at least get the cue mix set up the way that you have it, and then you can refine your adjustments, is to right-click on a main monitor mix channel. A window will pop up offering to copy your current mix to either aux or either cue. So I'll select Q1. All right, so now all the faders, all the panning are set for Q1. And I can now just make those adjustments. I can dial up the kick for my drummer, dial up the snare, and reduce the level of the hi-hat. So now let's take a quick listen to the balance I hear on my speakers versus what my drummer hears in his headphones. Here's the main monitor mix. And here's the cue mix being sent to headphone 1. However, there is one other nagging detail in my quest to provide my drummer with his own cue mix, and that's the fact that his headphones are not connected to either headphone amp on the Apollo X. Instead, his headphones are connected to a headphone amp in the other room, which is connected to the line outputs of the Apollo X. So I need some way to provide this cue mix via the line outputs, which is incredibly easy with the Apollo X. Taking a look again at the cue outputs popover, there's this field under each cue with the option to mirror to, which is currently set to none. What this is indicating is that I can send Q1 with all of its fader and panning adjustments I've made in the UAD console, not only to one or both headphone outputs, but I can also mirror the same cue to one of the many line outputs and ADAT outputs of the Apollo X. In this case, my drummer's headphone amp is connected to line outputs 1 and 2. So I'll select to mirror Q1's mix to line outputs 1 and 2. So now not only is headphone 1 receiving its mix from Q1, but so are line outputs 1 and 2, which is feeding my drummer's headphone amp. This is great. I can now listen to the main monitor mix on my studio speakers in the way that works best for me, but my drummer will hear his own mix via Q Mix 1 in a way that works best for him. But if I want to take a quick listen to what my drummer is actually hearing, I can pop on my headphones that are connected to headphone 1 on the Apollo X. And for owners of rack mount Apollo X interfaces, if you need to provide more than 2 Q mixes, just go right up to the top menu bar to UAD console, to preferences, and under hardware is an option for Q bus count. And this can be increased. That means I can provide up to 4 individual Q mixes via 4 sets of outputs on the Apollo X. Okay, so I've established recording levels, we have processing in place, my drummer has his own Q mix in his headphones. We're ready to record, right? But at some point, I'm probably going to need to talk to my drummer in the other room. I mean, he could talk out loud and I'll hear through some of the microphones, but how does he hear me? Well, there's a built-in Talkback mic right on the Apollo X interface. It's right on the front-facing plate, and all we have to do is enable a button for Talkback. You can do this by clicking on the control room button on the right-hand side of the UAD console, and we see a channel strip specifically for the built-in Talkback mic. Now notice there's some handy controls in the control room section. Number 1, there's a dim function, so you can dim the output. There's also the ability to switch from the main monitor mix to hear either the Q1 mix or Q2 mix through your main speakers. This is another way for you to double check and hear what's going on in each Q mix. And to the left of that is the Talkback channel strip. By default, the Talkback mic is already assigned to both Q mixes. So really all you have to do is just click on the talk button to engage the Talkback microphone and then just start talking to your performer. Of course, you can always adapt the Talkback level to each Q mix using the send faders. You can also engage Talkback from the interface either using the dedicated talk button on desktop models of the Apollo X or using the dedicated function button of the rack mount units. And it's that simple. Just click on the talk button and talk to your performer. And once you're done, just click talk again to turn off the Talkback mic. Note, you can also insert DSP effects for the Talkback channel. So in the case of maybe you need a little more level or you have some low end rumble in the room that's kind of distracting, you could apply some EQ or compression to roll off the low end to bring up the level to make it easier for your performer to hear you. And you can even record the Talkback microphone into Logic Pro. So a really cool way to get a rough demo recording or even a room recording if you're tracking in the same space as the Apollo X. From there, you can start recording. And as your needs grow, the Apollo X can grow with you. So if you start out with a desktop model, but later decide that you need more channels, so you're looking at a rack mount, you don't have to give up one for the other because these can be daisy chained together into a cascading system. So you can run both interfaces as if they were one interface. Pretty awesome. So there you go, 3 videos giving you a full lay of the land when it comes to the Apollo X Generation 2 interfaces, UAD console, Logic Pro, and how to get going with all this. Everything from Unison preamps to DSP effects, Talkback microphones, Q mixes, and everything in between. So I hope these videos were helpful for you, and I'll check you for more later. Take care.